So hello and welcome to today's episode of Character Critiques, where today I'm focusing on John Marston, the protagonist of Red Dead Redemption. Now before I begin today's video, I just want to say a few things. First of all, this is the first episode where I'm reviewing a protagonist, so what I talk about in this video will be a lot different compared to my other episodes. Secondly, since Red Dead Redemption isn't on PC, I can't have cutscenes playing in the background like I have done with all my other episodes, so I'm sorry if sometimes this looks like generic Red Dead gameplay with commentary. And thirdly, this video was made before Red Dead Redemption 2 was released, so some things I might say in this video might be wrong or right when it does release. And of course, spoilers. So with that out the way, let's start off with one of John's best characteristics, his backstory. When it comes down to John's backstory, I'm still blown away by how much detail Rockstar put into him, especially since this was John's first ever appearance. Just off the top of my head, throughout the game we learn all about John's childhood, such as his mother dying, his life in an orphanage, how he got into gangs, how he met Abigail, and more. But I think Rockstar have given John one of the most detailed histories out of any of their characters in all of their games. I don't think Rockstar have actually put this much detail into a single character before or since Red Dead. I feel most other Rockstar protagonists seem to have more focus on their present story and not so much their off-screen past, unless it's actually relevant to the story. Like for example, how in GTA Vice City, we know of Tommy Vercetti's past with the Ferrettis and his imprisonment, but we don't know when Tommy got involved with the Ferrettis or much about his past prior to that. In Red Dead, John mentioning his life in an orphanage, his mother and daughter dying don't have anything to do with the story itself, but it sets up a lot of history about John and fleshes out how he became an outlaw alongside his struggles in life. By expanding upon John's backstory, it gives the player more of an emotional attachment to John, so we feel we know him on a more personal level, which works out well at the end, which I'll cover later. By giving John such a detailed backstory, I think Rockstar was certainly thinking ahead with John as a character for the upcoming prequel, as they do have bits to work from with what John says in the first game. However, I know many Red Dead fans have already noticed it, but the way John never mentions characters like Arthur, Sadie and Charles strikes me as odd. You'd think John would remember them from his time in Dutch's gang. I hope Rockstar actually give us a reason as to why John doesn't remember them, as opposed to leaving one massive hole in John's past. I'm also hoping Rockstar don't contradict with what John says in Redemption 2 with what he says in Redemption 1. However, if this does happen, I only hope it's something really minuscule that most people will gloss over, instead of something massive like John saying his mother died when he was 15 as opposed to dying during childbirth. I'm honestly really interested to see how Rockstar handle John in Redemption 2. He's too much of a central character for him to be relegated to a minor side character, and I'd hope that his story isn't glossed over too much either, like John's daughter, how and when he left Dutch's gang, etc. When it comes to humour, I'd say John's humour comes more from wit and sarcasm instead of visual gags and exaggeration, like the scene with Dutch, John and Professor McDougal, where McDougal asks John what they'll do, and John responds by telling him he'll hand McDougal to Dutch and watch them tear him limb from limb in a really serious tone, which frightens McDougal. Okay, that does sound worse than it actually is, but I think in context it's an unexpected funny bit of sadistic sarcasm. And of course most of John's interactions with characters like Irish and Nigel West Dickens, who in my opinion were the characters who were mostly there for comic relief. Like I love the scene of Irish threatening the nuns, only to have John come in, knock him to the floor, grab him in a headlock, while John says he's his old friend of amnesia. Ultimately, I do think leaving most of the comedy to characters like Nigel West Dickens and Irish was a great choice, as it didn't take away the seriousness from John's story and interactions with other main characters like Bonnie, the Bioru and his family. And yes, I know that you can make John drunk and watch him stumble about until he falls flat on his arse and doesn't move, but I'm talking about John's humour in the story itself. Personally, I see John as a mostly serious character whose funny moments come from interacting with others instead of by himself. Like had John been a parody kind of character, like say Trevor Phillips, I would find it hard to take scenes like the family reuniting and John explaining his past seriously if John spends half the story yelling yee-haw at the top of his voice while telling Edgar about the time he got drunk and shagged a horse. It's also part of the reason why I couldn't take GTA 5's Bury the Hatchet scene seriously from Trevor's point of view. I personally think that John's humour might not appeal to people who prefer more shock and offensive kind of humour, but this comes down to your personal preference however. Now for the first bit of negative criticism, I absolutely hated the customisation we get for John. I honestly think it's one of the worst we've had from Rockstar. Now this is definitely more of a criticism on Rockstar than John, but I'll cover what I mean for context. But from GTA Vice City to Bully, the customisation only got better and better. Like in Vice City we got outfits, in San Andreas we got to customise individual outfits and CJ's weight. But from GTA 4 to about GTA 5, I feel the customisation got less and less. Like how in GTA 4 we didn't even get a fraction of the clothes we got in GTA San Andreas, and in Red Dead we're back to outfits again. Not even purchasable ones, they're just all unlockable. Now unlockable outfits are perfectly fine as it gives us something to do in free mode, but I feel by not giving us purchasable outfits was a bit lazy. Now, I know Rockstar is already limited by the wild western setting, but I think maybe giving John some new clothing like hats, undershirts, dusters or vests would have been great. Now, going off what I've seen in the Redemption 2 trailers, Rockstar have certainly stepped this up, and I'm glad we're not just back to unlockable outfits. It also gives us some more uses for money outside of gambling and buying houses and that. Now, one addition I like that is currently unique to Red Dead is the honour system, where depending on how you act, if you do good deeds like collecting bounties, helping strangers and all that, John becomes much more kinder. But if we run around shooting and robbing people, we lose honour and John becomes an incredibly nasty and dangerous person. Now, I do like this addition as it gives us a bit more freedom to make John act as we see him. Like, do we see John as a man who is trying to redeem his past from his life with Dutch's gang, or do we see him as a man who will never change and is just doing what he needs to do for his family? But I feel that playing as an evil John is completely pointless, as the whole story revolves around John trying to redeem himself. Like in free mode for example, we can have John massacre the entire town, robbing many other people, then we get cutscenes like say the meeting Nigel West Dickens one, where he's by himself in the middle of nowhere, John comes by, helps him up and rushes him to get medical attention. Which, if you're doing an evil John playthrough, it's a stark contrast to how you'd make him act outside the story cutscenes. An evil John would probably rob Nigel blind and let him die. Nigel himself even says that he was robbed there and left to die to begin with. Okay, I know the game is called Redemption, not Red Dead rob the fuck out of as many people as you can, but since the options and rewards there to be as evil as possible, it's kinda disappointing how being evil has no effect on the story at all. You can just massacre the town of Armadillo, then just march into Marshal Johnson's office and tag along with him to take down some other criminal. However, I do think John's evil side and lack of morals can shine in specific missions. However, I think they're few and far between. Like how in the mission Water and Honesty, John can either obtain the deed by paying up or murder the guy outright. Most notably, the I Know You mission is the most infamous for this, as John can either donate to a nun, rob the nun in broad daylight, or you can pay a guy to cheat on his wife. But personally, I feel the choices to be evil were quite lacking, but when they do show up, I feel they can show just how cold-blooded or kind John can really be. Take for example the mission Water and Honesty again. It's one of the first side missions that lets you choose a civilised or brutal outcome. If you choose to kill Clyde, John just hands over a blood-soaked deed without any sense of remorse. He just hands over the deed and doesn't even react when McAllister reprimands John for murder, and the only way John reacts is with a rather unsettling good luck. However, if John pays for the property, John acts much more formal than this.
Well, howdy. You got the deed?
Yep. Here it is.
Yeah. Oh, there's blood on this deed, Marston. I didn't tell you to kill the poor old man.
Good luck with the property, McAllister.
Yeah. Howdy. You got the deed?
Yep. Here it is.
There you go. There's a little something extra in there for you. Always best when these transactions go smoothly.
Particularly when you can make more money out of it. Good luck with the property, McAllister.
Oh, yeah.
The quietness of John in the first scene gives me a much more sinister vibe. Like John is an outlaw until the very end, who doesn't give a damn what happens as long as he gets paid for his work. Now, whenever talking to a prostitute, John will always decline saying he's happily married, which is actually very respectable and shows John loves Abigail with all his life to even think of going with another woman, even when Abigail's still under Bureau control.
Well, if you're fixing for some female company, you can do a lot worse than Armadillo. Fine as cream gravy they are, not like Thieves Landing. Dang, those girls ain't even fit for a drinking man to hole up with.
I'm a married man, I'm afraid.
Ain't we all?
John, and technically Jack I guess, but he's single anyway, but John is currently the only Rockstar protagonist who does not cheat on his partner no matter what. Since in GTA San Andreas and GTA 4, CJ and Nico can see multiple women at the same time and still go with prostitutes, and Michael can cheat on his wife if the player wants him to. But by having John refuse to even go with a prostitute is a great choice because the whole point of the game is John trying to get his family back by doing whatever it takes, yet if John goes with a prostitute I feel it would take away some of John's love for his family. Like why bother go rescuing your wife when all you can do is go chat up some woman at the local saloon? Regardless of however you make John act, John is a very loyal person to his family, and while that is a recurring theme in Rockstar's games, John is arguably the most loyal because he just cannot hurt them. Because the game gives you an instant game over if you try to harm Jack, Abigail, Uncle, and I think Rufus the family's dog. On the subject of Jack, especially the later missions of the game, having John and Jack have a few father-son missions is perfect for building up the relationship the pair have. Now the missions with Jack are far from the most intense the game has to offer, but they work well because it's all about John and Jack bonding, doing everyday normal activities, like John helping Jack prepare for adulthood and that. I know to some other players who prefer more fast-paced and action-filled missions, most of Jack's missions would probably be boring to them, but I think that's also what makes it work so well, because John is merely helping his son prepare for future life, not teaching Jack how to mow down 5 horses with 3 bullets. John is just trying his best to be a good father to ensure Jack does not follow his path in life of crime and gangs. Even though this is most likely criticising Jack a bit more, I'd say the stark differences between the two shows John did a great job in making sure Jack is on the right path. Well, until a certain event in game, that is. In case I haven't implied it enough already, I think one of John's strongest points is also how he interacts with people in the story. I won't cover them all, however, because there's just too many. I find that after Dutch's death we see a different style of missions, and by this I mean typically in the GTA series and Bully, I find that the last few missions always become incredibly hectic and fast paced and action packed, in the lead up to one final mission where the antagonists get what they deserve. But Redemption's missions take a more laid back and relaxed approach. Now that's not a bad thing, because I actually view this as John seeing his story as over. He's done his duty for the government and now he wants to live peacefully on his ranch with his family, which is why we have missions teaching Jack how to skin elk, as opposed to say John and most of the supporting cast taking down Edgar Ross and every single agent in the country. Another reason why I really like this approach is because it gives us some heartwarming scenes and more character development building relationships between John and his family, as well as it throws us all off guard for the final mission. Well, in fairness, there's a massive bit of foreshadowing which Jack mentions in a book he's reading, which I think is a bit too on the nose, but if you're not paying attention, or if you're playing through Redemption's story really slowly, you could overlook that. Now when it comes to John's death, I still believe it's one of the most shocking out of all of Rockstar's games, as we never really seen a protagonist actually die before. Okay, we do have Vic Vance who dies in Vice City's intro, but I'm talking about the protag who we spent so long playing as, because we're so used to seeing our protagonist take down every single enemy of theirs guns blazing. Like, we're typically expecting John to take down everyone by himself when the army comes storming the ranch, cue a shootout, maybe a chase across the map, kill Edgar and his lackeys, and the Marston family live happily ever after, the end. But John's death actually brings a bit of realism to how an event like this would actually play out. Well, if you take away John holding the ranch for 30 minutes beforehand. But in this mission we can just tell John knows he has no escape. He can run, but he'll eventually be tracked down by Edgar Ross, and going off the trailers for Redemption 2, this could be partially why John is so willing to sacrifice himself, because he knows how much hell it is to run, and this time he's on his own. He doesn't have anybody to back him up anymore. Dutch's gang is dead, it's just him and he knows he's about to die. There's a massive sense of hopelessness in this one scene, and that alone sets John apart from every other Rockstar protagonist. He actually knows his fate. Now the ending is one of the best because of how it's so perfectly crafted. We spent hours knowing all about John, and how many people grew attached to him. We knew all about his struggles in life, through his past, how he met Abigail, his close ties to Dutch, how much effort he actually went through to save his family by killing his former friends, only to have it all taken away from him unexpectedly by Edgar Ross. Now earlier I actually mentioned about having the option to make John a good or an evil person, but I feel that if you actually played as an evil John throughout the story, I feel the ending is actually really fitting in a karmic kind of way. John finally gets what he deserves. He never did redeem himself at all. He was a criminal to his dying breath, and in hindsight he was probably better off being taken out by Edgar and the army for the safety of the citizens. But I guess in many other ways though, this could also be considered a karmic ending for John for all of his past crimes anyway, which I do hope are expanded upon in the upcoming prequel. Now in closing, I believe John Marston is the best protagonist Rockstar have made so far, and aside from the customization options, which I stand by in saying that they were terrible, I do think it will be hard to top a character like John. I can only hope that Arthur Morgan is as fleshed out as John was in Redemption 2. And of course Rockstar's future protagonists in games like GTA 6, Bully 2 or whatever. So that's it for today's video. I know it does seem a bit rushed, and it is because I couldn't write up everything I really wanted to, because the script would be far too long and probably about, 30 minutes, 45 minutes long. So yeah, that's why I couldn't really cover John's story in Mexico, Blackwater and all that. So yeah, I apologise for that. I mean, I am considering doing a part 2 of this in Redemption 2, you know, criticising how John was compared to his Red Dead Redemption 1 self. But yeah. So yeah, that's it for today's video. Thank you for watching and have a nice day.